uh, admitting people in the room. While she's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Okay.
Greetings, everyone. I am Representative Karen Camper from Tennessee, and I serve as the proud president of the National Organization of Black Elected Legislative Women, or Nobel Women. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization primarily composed of current and former Black women legislators and many appointed officials. Our objectives are to create programs and platforms that advance Black women in the field of public policy, public service, and community engagement, or civic engagement. To act as a network and support system for Black women in public policy and organizational leadership. To serve as a venue for thoughtful dialogue on issues of public interest between elected officials and stakeholders, and to train and educate a class of cultivated and experienced Black women to assume both governmental and corporate leadership roles. On behalf of our board of directors, I want to welcome you to our event, We Are Hurting, the State of Black Women's Mental Health. With the recent civil unrest and the COVID-19 pandemic, we thought it was urgent that we have this timely discussion. Black women are often seen as the backbone of their families, in their workplaces, and even in our elections. We're mothers, daughters, sisters, leaders, legislators, and by inhabiting these roles, we can feel like the world is on our shoulders and that we are expected to just hold everything together. With this reality, Black women must take their own self-care and mental health seriously. That is why I am so excited to be joined tonight by behavioral specialists and professionals and advocates discussing the state of our mental health and providing us with some tangible action steps for better physical, mental, and emotional health. But before I begin, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Bev Johnson. Bev Johnson was born Beverly Elaine Johnson in Memphis, Tennessee, to the parents of the late William Van Johnson and Julia Atlas Danner Johnson. Bev is a 1970 graduate of Ann Arbor Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She received her bachelor's degree in arts from Russ College in literature in 1975 and her master's of science degree in educational media technology in 1979 from Jackson State University. In 2003, Bev received a certification degree in substance abuse counseling from Southwest Tennessee Community College, as well as certification in drug court counseling from the Drug Court Institute in Nashville, Tennessee. Bev is a broadcasting genius. Her journey began in 1976 at WJSU Radio, which eventually led her to WOKJ, WJMI, and WKXI radio stations in Jackson, Mississippi, working as a disc jockey, a programming assistant, public affairs director, and news director. In 1981, the journey continued to Memphis, Tennessee, working at WLOK, WMKM, WWEE, WLVS, and now the legendary WDIA radio station, where she's been employed for 37 years and continues to host the Bev Johnson Show, which is in its 33rd year. Bev has been a radio broadcaster for 44 years. As a community-minded individual, Bev continues to work her motto through community service. She served as a board member of the Rock and Soul Museum, Memphis Area Planned Parenthood, the National Black Programmers Coalition, and Memphis City Beautiful. Bev also served as a mentor for the Gordon Elementary School Girls Program, chairperson of the NAACP Radiothon, annual Radiothon, former auctioneer for WKNO television station's Action Auction, and the Memphis chapter coalition of 100 Black women. She is a member of the Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated and a chartering member of the Shelby County, Tennessee alumni chapter of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, where she served as second vice president for 2 years. Some of her awards include the 1989, 1991, 1992, and 1996 honoree of the News Public Affairs Director, National Programmers Coalition, UNCF Outstanding Alumnus Award in 1996, so National Association of Broadcasters Marconi Award Personality of the Year nominee for 1993, 1994, 1995, and in 1996, Billboard Personality of the Year. Bev has also been honored from the Tennessee General Assembly, House of Representatives, the Memphis City Council, Shelby County Commission, and the U.S. House of Representatives for the Bev Johnson Show on WDIA Radio. In 2014, Bev was inducted into the History Makers Media Division. Her oral history is housed in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and in 2019, career class of the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame, the first African-American woman to do so. And in 2020, and the 2020 class of the City of Memphis Heritage Trailblazer Award. Bev is a member of the Mount Pisgah CME Church, co-collaborator of Heart to Heart Counseling Services, former radio instructor at Rusk College in Holly Springs, Mississippi, where she taught radio for 8 years. She is currently an instructor at the Southwest Tennessee Community College and has taught speech and writing for 29 years. Bev is also a motivational speaker, where she encourages celebrating life. Bev's motto, as you treat yourself, you will treat others. Ladies, Bev Johnson.
Thank you so much, Representative Camper. It is my delight to be here for the National Organization of Black Elected Women. And as I always say, as I grow older, I pay less attention to what men and women say. I just watch what they do. And in saying that, I have been watching mental health for a long time. And I'm an advocate of mental health and a big advocate of mental health for women. So I am just proud to be here and to be in this conversation with you ladies. And I know we are going to take some fabulous things back with us this evening. I would like to introduce to you our panel of guests, our distinguished panel of guests. First, Diane P Young, who is a wife, mother, a grandmother, a sister, administrator, a talk show host, a teacher, a preacher, evangelist, pastor, counselor, and author. Pastor Young is one of the city's most dynamic ministers, preachers, and Bible teachers. As a widely sought conference speaker and celebrated author, she's touched the lives of thousands with her spirited and audacious style of preaching and teaching. She labors in ministry as pastor of the Healing Center Full Gospel Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee. Our next speaker is Dr. Alpha J. Stewart, who is the Senior Associate Dean for Community Health, Engagement, and Director, Center for Health and Justice, Involved Youth at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center here in Memphis. In 2018, she was elected president of the American Psychiatric Association, the first, African-American elected in the 175th year history of the organization. She previously served as executive director for Memphis's federally funded system of care program for children with serious emotional disorders and worked for decades as CEO in public mental health systems in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New York. Our next speaker is Dr. Andrea D Willis, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, which has more than 6,000 employees and serves more than 3.5 million members in the state and across the country. And in this role, Dr. Willis guides Blue Cross clinical processes that are central to improving health and well-being for their members. She oversees total health management, pharmacy management, and is responsible for achieving and maintaining clinical quality, excellence, and optimizing member care and medical management functions. And the oversight of clinical risk management and collaborating with provider and community. And last but not least, it is my partner in crime, Dr. Dorothy Jeffries Anderson, a licensed mental health professional with certifications in crisis and trauma-informed counseling, narrative therapy, developmental coaching. She's currently practicing in Jackson, Mississippi. She is a native of Memphis, Tennessee. She's a graduate of George Peabody College and Vanderbilt University, where she completed dual degree credits for a doctorate in human development counseling and management of human services organizations. And for the last 33 years, she's been the psychologist and mental health specialist for the Bev Johnson Show on the legendary WDIA radio. So we welcome all these wonderful ladies. So ladies, are you ready to get started? Let's get started. I want to start first with Pastor Young. And you know, Pastor Young, Black women attend services. We believe in faith. Can you tell us how faith plays a role in our mental health and mental well-being?
Thank you, Bev. And it is so good to be a part of this awesome panel tonight. All of my friends, good to be with you. The main thing I want to say about our faith is that I don't know how many people keep up with the numbers, but about 77% or 79% of Black women say they say they have a point of faith and contact in their faith. But when they get in trouble, about 87% of them, they get in turmoil, they turn to their faith. I think the best way for me to wrap up how important faith is to Black women is that most of the time we're looking for help. But when we deal with our faith not only gives us help, it gives us hope. And if there are moments in our lives where we need more than help, we need hope. And in that, we find our faith. And I must be sure that I point out that at our church, we stress help for those who need mental health services. Matter of fact, we have a counseling center. We do all of those things as well. But when it comes to our faith helps us get there, because there we find our hope.
Wanted to also ask you, Pastor Young, and when we think about our faith, because we sometimes, it gets so overwhelming for Black women and they forget about faith. But what can our faith leaders, our religious leaders do to serve Black women more?
I think one of the main notes that could be played a little better is that Black women need to be acknowledged for their contribution, not just to the world, but to the church. Matter of fact, if you took the Black women out of the Black church, wouldn't be many people left. So we have to acknowledge the contribution that's made by Black women to the church. And not only do we have to acknowledge their contribution, we have to acknowledge their influence. We need to know that Black women, we have influence and we can make things happen, whereas other folk trying to make it happen, we can make it happen. And I think we need acknowledgement more than anything else. We need acknowledgement. We need to be given the roles, and it needs to be made perfectly clear that a woman can bring it.
You know, you mentioned that Black women have basically always been in the church. And I'm thinking, if it wasn't for the church, and a lot of them, that kept them going. I mean,
Yeah.
that faith, it really kept them going. What would happen if that is taken away now in 2020?
And I think that many people we talk about, and I guess we might as well talk about the pandemic because it's all around us and it's with us. And we talk about the church being closed during this time. But if most churches are like our church, we're not closed. We don't have worship services for the 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours that we normally do on Sundays. We stream live, but we're also protecting our members. That's important to us. And I mean, anybody that want to go back, that's fine. But the church is more than those hours we spend on Sundays. And I think those who are part of the church, they're finding out that there's more of a contribution you can make to the church other than going those 2 hours on Sundays. Matter of fact, we need you more during the week. I mean, we're giving away food. We got a clinic so people can come. We have a counseling center. So we're not closed. We just don't have worship the way we used to. We're learning a new way of doing things. And for some people, it has been difficult, even just losing those 2 hours. And I understand that. But we don't know what God is doing. And in this season, we need to, everybody's been talking over the years that God getting ready to shift us. Okay, we've been shifted. Now, how are we going to handle the shift that God has given us? And I see us in a different place, doing more and doing it better.
All right. I want to turn now to Dr. Stewart. And Dr. Stewart, that Black women are often not afforded the opportunity to enjoy Black girlhood. And if you know where I'm coming from this. Black girls are over-policed, over-sexualized, and underprotected. Can you talk to us a little bit about mental health and wellness of children and how we can show up better for the Blacks in our lives?
Well, Bev, thank you so much for asking me that question. You know, of course, as the Pastor Young, this has a special place in my heart because this is the population of folks that I work with, kids, particularly young Black kids. And unfortunately, more young Black women than we'd like to think wind up in some kind of out-of-home placement, whether it's child welfare or foster care or even the juvenile justice system. In my day-to-day work, a lot of the interactions have to do with children who have been failed by us as adults. Children who expected us to protect them, to look out for them, to make good decisions on their behalf. And that's whether it's in the family or at school or somehow in the community. And in reality, we are failing them. And we are particularly failing our young Black girls. Let me give you a story. Since many people on this call hear about the agencies that work with these kids, that are responsible for these kids, whether it's healthcare or social services or child welfare. Let me tell you the story that one young girl told me a few years back about how all of us adults who kept interfering, and this is the way she described it, interfering with her life, kept thinking we were doing her right. We were doing right by her. When in fact, we saw a family that we claimed was dysfunctional. We took her out of that environment and put her in a nice foster care system. And they got her a nice foster family. And we checked in on her every month or so, and things looked well and all the reports sounded good. And what was going on behind closed doors was that she was being sexually abused. She was being trafficked amongst the friends of the family. And every time someone came to check on her and she tried to tell them what was going on, they said she was acting out. They made her out to be the person who was wrong. They forced her to continue being in that situation, and she began running away. And then she became a runaway, which placed her in jeopardy because now she's getting into trouble that is wound her in the justice system. And when she told this story, I have to admit, I had no recognition of any of that being a part of the systems that we were placing our children in. I didn't realize that we weren't doing a thorough enough job of reviewing records and looking into families when we put kids into foster care, or double checking with other sources about what we were told was going on. And so every time we fail a child, particularly a young girl, what we do is expose her to a life of trauma. And we've got a great language for it now. We call them adverse childhood experiences. We know the connection that we have between those experiences in childhood and how it affects our health, our psychological well-being, our ability to have relationships that are healthy when we get older, and that often lead to an early death because of risky behaviors or of chronic medical conditions. We know all of this stuff because we know the science, and we still haven't figured out how to do better by our kids, particularly our young girls. And so in answer to what should we be doing that would be helpful to these children, we should recognize what we now know to be what's going on in their lives. We should adopt and establish policies that are consistent with what's going on, as opposed to what is consistent with what we are told needs to be done. We need to investigate a little more. We need to listen a lot more. We need to address these things at the root. You know, for a long time, we believed that incest didn't happen in the Black community. Suicide didn't happen in the Black community. People who were drug addicts in the Black community were just these were character flaws. People with mental illness just weren't right with God. Pastor Young and I, you know, all the time run into people who've had these experiences until they get to a place like her program, where it's open, and welcoming, and non-threatening, and non-judgmental, where you can actually come in and feel like somebody wants to help you. We need more of those kinds of services and less of the cookie cutter, everybody gets the same thing. You know, drug courts are based on the fact that everybody who comes in has a different story that has led them to that place. And every time we try to use a single way of dealing with any of these problems, whether it's mental illness, substance abuse, trauma from sexual or physical abuse, every time we decide there's a cookie cutter response, we're harming someone that we're supposed to be helping. So I think for our kids, we need to listen, we need to learn from them, we need to address problems looking at it from their perspective. And we need to acknowledge that until they're about 25 or 26, they're going to make really bad decisions because they've got no real functioning brain. Anybody on this call who has a child and has had to tell them at least 5 times to clean up their room, stop teasing their little brother or sister, take out the trash, or stop something, knows that you're talking to someone who has nothing between their ears. That brain has not fully developed, and so they can't make good decisions. What we need to do is help guide them and direct them in the right way, and make sure that we're there to support them, that we're there to put structure in place so that they don't get all outside the lane that they need to be on, and that they recognize that we care about them no matter what, that we love and support them no matter what, unconditionally.
I want to go back, Dr. Stewart. You kept mentioning the word failed. We failed our children. When you think about Black girls, and where Black girls had to be made to be strong, we had to do the cooking, we had the cleaning, we had to take care of brother and sister. Did that have, as when they become an adult, do something to their mental health? Because they had to be grown when they were a child.
When they were a child. Yeah, the loss of one childhood to all of those adult responsibilities means that you don't get to go through the normal developmental stages where you learn things. Each stage of development teaches you something that is going to be helpful later in life. So when you don't have that, it's like you skip right through, you breeze right through it at record speed. Through everything that is educational in your own development. The other thing it does is that it shows us in a very warped way almost, that we've got to be excellent, better, super at everything. The whole notion of being a superwoman grows out of having to do everything, do it well. And, you know, some of you grew up in the same time frame that I did, where you had to do twice as much to get half as far. You had to be twice as good, you know, that whole notion. And while on some level it compels you to achieve, in some other ways, it forces you to become an overachiever, a superwoman, someone who can't say no to anyone, someone who winds up, and the words that I'm hearing most since the pandemic, since the coronavirus pandemic, are frustrated, overwhelmed, and exhausted. And these are coming from women who have historically been multitasking all their lives, you know, from childhood when they were taking care of brothers and sisters, straight through current relationships where they are wife and mother, a child of an elderly parent that they're caring for, doing volunteer work at the church or in the community center, and holding down a full-time job while doing most of the parenting work in the home. Everything from cleaning the house to doing the laundry is their responsibility, and they do it almost without thinking. So what happened when we were growing up and having those adult responsibilities, we embraced that. We put that on like a suit of armor and said, this is just who we are and what we do. And if you don't break out of that and learn to ask for help, learn to understand that you cannot do it all. You can have it all, but not all at the same time is the way many people now say it. But you can't do it all and come out feeling whole and happy and full of life the way you want to live it.
I like that. Want to bring in Dr. Jeffries Anderson. And, you know, Dr. Jeffries, Black women are always called strong women. They're the backbone of the family, even political problems. Even Dr. Stewart mentioned, you know, we're super women. But I want to ask you this question, and since we're talking about mental health, it has always been taboo for Black people to get help for their problems. It was always, as Dr. Stewart mentioned, hush, hush. We didn't talk about it, you know, and then that Black woman was hurting, even though she had to take care of the family, she was hurting. So my question to you, Dr. Jeffries, how can we help that Black woman who is hurting today and maybe being depressed and going through some things? How can we help her? I think, Dr. Jeffries, you're muted. You need to take off mute. We can't. Okay, good.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, start over. Yes.
All right. As you said, you know, we have been indoctrinated to believe that we are the backbone, that we are the bridge that everybody has to cross over in order to be okay, to do okay, and to get what they need. But what that also tells us, by being the backbone, we are burdened. We are burdened at an early life. We then model worry and burden and hopelessness and helplessness to our girls, but they pick that up because they want to help mom so she feels better or do better, but it's something that we pass down as a legacy. And the piece that resonates with me is that if we think that everybody gets to walk over us and we carry everybody else, that kills that spark that Dr. Stewart was talking about viewing a future, believing in a future. You know, many of our girls have no inkling how to dream because dreams are not meant for them. And if they can't dream, they can't fly. So they start out very early on trying to grasp whatever it is to kind of nurture those holes that they've experienced, the disappointment about not being expected to dream, the pain that comes when they're in school, when they're segregated or isolated or identified as being different and being treated different in a way that they're excluded. and not having the same opportunities. Because if you think back from our cohort group of growing up, high school and the idea that we were going to college was nurtured by everybody. And it didn't matter what your income was, and because we were all pretty much in the same bracket, but it was fostered and it was nurtured, and you were taught to believe you can do anything that you want to do, and you can have anything, that you just have to work hard, and we will sacrifice and support you with that. And somehow along the road, and I always kind of attributed to that it's been most deadly, was during the late 70s, early 80s crack epidemic is when the first pandemic hit us. That once our family started splintering off, we lost a lot of the assets that benefited us. Grandmothers were only 15 or 20 years older than the children that were coming in and their children. So developmentally, they didn't get to go through all of the stages where they were building up on those tasks so that they could do more complex tasks and what have you. And as they went through that, through those aborted stages, if you can imagine Swiss cheese, that's kind of what our emotional experience is like. And all of my career, these are the people that I deal with. I deal with the parents of those children and some of the children who maintain now a legacy of trauma. You know, it is now not exceptional to know a 13-year-old is having a child and has no idea what's happening to her body. Or it's no big deal that a 22-year-old has 6 children and doesn't have a high school education. And how do you begin to talk to them about planning for a future when they are just struggling to live day to day? So it's the young women and it's the middle-aged women who have worked hard and maybe they have been successful, but they didn't get the other balance in it. They don't have an attachment to a significant other, or they battle the work environment every day where they're still fighting to be acknowledged and validating for what they're doing or what they're trying to achieve. And so we are the women who somehow end up on the corner of desperation and possible opportunity. And many times the bus passes us by, but we're supposed to get it together, keep it going, tuck it in, pull together until we reach a point where we are ready to explode. And I think that we have come to that juncture now with the pandemic, the virus, forcing everybody to go into isolation and to be alone. We are forced to deal with ourselves. And many of the women that I've been seeing in the last 6 months are women who are terrified of coming face to face with who they are, how they feel, what they think, what it is they are tired of, what directions they see themselves going. Because when you've worn this facade for so long, the myth of the strong Black woman, the woman who can take it all and pass it off, don't need anybody else, the suspicious woman who doesn't trust other women, because you know you can't trust no woman and you better keep your business to yourself. And we don't go to that mental health stuff because they just want to get into your business, and then what happens afterwards, you feel like you've been violated again. You know, all of these things. And I think that when George Floyd's statement came out about "Mama, I can't breathe," the thing, that was the second pandemic that hit Black women. They understood what he was saying. Not that he was a man there crying that, but they could feel, we could feel, because I know I experienced it, we could feel the rumbling. You could feel the chains rattling, and as the old folks say, the bones rattling. They're saying, this is a different time, something is happening. And the fear then became, what does it mean to me? A lot of people kind of took stock, like, why am I crying about this? This is not a new incident. But we found ourselves just raw with emotion and crying when we did the show on mental health. The calls and the emails and stuff that we got afterwards, we are exactly where we should be today, trying to look at this and trying to put it in some kind of perspective, because our sisters are hurting. And fortunately, we have the benefit of friendships and colleagues and what have you, that you can catch your breath. We know when we're getting to a bad space and we need to exhale. But what about the ones out there who are afraid to exhale and they can't breathe and they're still trying to function? That's the rumblings that we hear. That's the wailing that we are going to be confronted with. So I think that this is an awesome meeting of us coming together as a collective mindset to think through what kinds of needs we can think of to intervene before it all falls apart, so that whatever ideas or help or extension of service that we can offer, that we can lure, we can convince, we can hold, whatever it takes for our sisters to get some help and to benefit for what it is their need. And it may be just a thoughtful person in their lives. It may be somebody who's willing to mentor them. It may be just a friend where they can let it down and feel a moment of trust and comfort. But it's definitely needed, and we are definitely at the point where we have to respond.
Dr. Jeffers, I want to go back. Haven't Black women always been waiting to exhale? And we've been waiting to exhale, and we haven't gotten that support that we needed, because we had to be those super women. Yeah.
Yeah, but how many Black women even take the opportunity to exhale? See, we are very gifted in fast forwarding scripts. So I'm in trouble, I'm hurting, and you said, well, you need to exhale. And then I said, well, I don't know how to do that. And you said, well, you need to share, you need to tell, you can talk to me. I fast forward, why she want to be my business? If I tell her that, how do I know she's not gonna tell somebody else? She just knows it. She know, and then the next time I see you, I'm not going to be as upfront or as friendly, because I've decided you're a threat. We feel threatened at the thought of becoming vulnerable, of opening it up, because, just like in therapy, when you open somebody up, if you're competent, you better be able to close them up, or you need to leave them alone. And a lot of times people have years, layers of trauma, of hurt, of disappointment. So when we start peeling that back, we have to be able to have a balm or something to put on it, because they're raw. And the first step is create an opportunity where we can model trust and friendship with each other, because I think that that's one of the biggest things that is missing in relationships of intra-Black women, is the fact that we've been trained not to be open or to trust anybody else. And that's a very lonely thing. And if that doesn't make you crazy, the pandemic is showing that doesn't work for us. So how do we do that is one of the things I think is a primary item on the agenda, building trust.
What about those women who do seek help, and then you got the folks who are talking about, oh, you went to a therapist, you crazy, and then that brings on something else, correct?
It does. I think that it depends on how much you educate your client about what it is that they are coming to do with you, that you're not a magician, you're not a witch doctor, you can't just pull something out and say, poof, you're fixed. A lot of times people believe that, and they usually come when they're so desperate that you will get one shot. When they come in that first visit, you better give it your best work, because many of them are never coming back again. They benefited, but that's all they will do is they will come in. So the kind of work that we've been doing on the show for years, you know, through the workshops, through the women's groups, through the mental health community events, is trying to reduce the stigma around it. And I always tell people, if you broke your leg and you don't like to go to hospitals, does that mean you're going to hobble around on a crooked leg the rest of your life when you can go and get it set? It may hurt because you're dealing with stuff that's a wound. You're dealing with accumulation of infection and inflammation. But once you clear all of that out, you can begin to heal. And that's something we deserve. You deserve to heal and have an opportunity to have the life. But the stigma is still out there, still running.
I like you when you say you deserve to heal, and this gives me an opportunity to bring Dr. Willis in. And Dr. Willis, a lot of times we don't have the services, and mental health services are often seen taboo, inaccessible to our communities. We don't have the money. Can you give us some insight about benefits that most people have through their insurance and how they can utilize it, or what happens when we don't have that insurance? Dr. Willis.
Thank you so much. So I think there are some misconceptions around what benefits people have. Most people have comprehensive benefits. I mean, there's a few employers that don't offer it, but that's a very rare exception these days. So the benefits that you have are for outpatient visits. So if it's with a counselor or other outpatient treatments, we have inpatient benefits as well. Emergency visits are covered as well as pharmacy. So all of those things are covered, and they're covered on par with actual physical benefits as well. I think a good point was made about, you know, you would seek help if it was a physical ailment. And now more and more, we're saying that this is a chronic condition as well that does need to be treated. And so the coverage is on par with physical benefits, like I said. One of the things that we found extremely interesting, and something that actually positive came out of COVID, if you will, is that we increased telehealth and telemedicine services. And we have seen an explosion in the number of people that are actually tapping into mental health benefits since that has been expanded. So with telehealth, sometimes that's a doctor with the patient right next to them, and that's consulting another provider. That's a specialist. We're seeing that, but we're also seeing direct interactions between a patient and a provider. And that's been really great to see. Like 7 of the top 10 diagnoses that we've seen come in during this time period have been mental health diagnoses. When we look at our data from mid-March of last year through mid-May, as compared to that same time period this year, those claims have gone up 50 times. And again, a lot of this is around mental health. So we're very, very excited to see that increased utilization. We think part of what that is that it's improved access, but it also takes away that stigma. We're finding out people are at least more willing, or at least that's what we're believing from our data, to have that conversation virtually. And we hope that that leads to a long-term interaction with the provider and a relationship. But that is something that we feel like that has been positive during this crisis. We have already made the move to make that permanent because we do view it as being that positive.
Can you, when on the show, I get a lot of women who call me and ask me, do I know a therapist or so who they can go to? And sometimes I may have the information and sometimes I don't. How can Black women go by finding the best mental health providers to serve them?
We would encourage you, actually, there's a lot of options for that, but we would encourage you to reach out to us for one thing. And the reason that I think that's an important option is because we know who's in network for your plan. And so where the coverage will be and people won't get surprises when they get that bill. So we would like to do that. But I think another thing that people don't realize is that we actually have doctors and nurses and licensed clinical staff that work with us. So they really can give you that information. We actually have some peer counselors as well that people can talk to. We've actually now deployed some digital options. So if a person doesn't even want to call us and talk about it over the phone, now we can do secure chats with them and things of that nature. We can do daily check-ins with people digitally. So there's a lot of things that we're doing that way. So definitely feel free to give us a call. I think that's always a good idea, like I said, to maximize your benefits, to know that you have all these things. But you can also just ask your doctor. Your doctor is a good option to find out. And those things really do go together. If you're not doing well from a mental health perspective, it does affect your physical health, and they can go, and it can go vice versa. So certainly your doctor is a good person to reach out to. If you have receptive family and friends to getting help in this way, I think they are definitely good people to ask. We heard the pastor talk earlier, and certainly, you know, my brother is a pastor. So we have these conversations all the time. Ministry and medicine can go together. And so, I mean, we don't want people to miss out on that connection as well.
And also in sharing that, how we can get the wellness. And do you think that if your providers that can share more information for women to get the help they need? But the thing is, are they willing to get it? And now, since this pandemic, you know, people have lost their jobs. They may not have the insurance. What can they do? Are there other resources?
There are other resources out there. I mean, there are clinics out there that will do this type work. I know of several of them across the state. So there are definitely clinics. I mean, people can still call us. We're still willing to connect people to those resources. Our foundation supports some of those clinics for people that may be uninsured or underinsured. So certainly we would still love to give that information for people that are willing. There are different things now. There are different talk therapies. You know, I mean, you want people to have some options at their fingertips, no matter what situation they find themselves in. So now there are different apps, if you will, that will, you know, lead you in meditation. I'm not saying that those are preferred over other things that are out there, but there are different things that people can tap in, and especially the younger generation, they're really looking for all kinds of options. And there are those that exist out there today.
Mm-hmm. And I love when you just said meditation. That brings me back to Pastor Young. And when we think about our faith, and Pastor Young, can you help us that maybe we were not comfortable some in the beginning before churches closed to go to church, but how can we meditate? What do you suggest we do inside our homes, Pastor Young? You're muted, Pastor Young. Get off of mute.
Oh, I thought you guys.
There you go. Go, Pastor. That's okay.
I actually wanted to go back to Dr. Willis and what she was saying. When she was saying, I was just about to jump out of my seat, and she was talking about there are places that you can go. I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we are the Healing Center, but we are more than just where you go to worship. We have a free clinic with doctors. We partnered with UT, Dr. Stewart, her team. We got doctors, we've got nurse practitioners. We have a clinic that's open where people can come free, no money. They can come there and get served. I want to be sure that I put that out there.
Yeah.
That we believe spirit, soul, and body, the whole man. You know, it's not just one piece of the man that we can serve and make that man whole. We got to deal with the whole man. So in addition to that, we work with the University of Memphis, social workers. We've got what we call PALs, and you could say that's a friend, but we call our program the Emotional Fitness Centers of Tennessee. We've been doing that for the last 12 years, where we find you places to go after we screen those individuals. We get them to places. If we don't have it available there, we have counselors, but if it's they need medication, because we believe that I think Dr. Jeffrey said it, if you need some medicine, you just, to balance those chemicals, you need to get the medicine so you can function properly. And so we believe that it takes all of it to make us. Everybody may not need medicine, and we want people to know that you may need a faith aid, and that's that pill. That pill will be your faith aid. It will aid you to get you to where you want to be. You take that medicine, but you also never undermine the power of God and what God can do. I know God can do anything but fail, but God has placed doctors, physicians, nurses, all of these things in our way so we could be whole. And meditation and praying, I believe in all of those things. Matter of fact, me and my husband, we have this thing with, and I know Dr. Jeffries know what I'm talking about, relaxation. Hey, it works for us. And we do our guided imagery, and we rest in not just the Lord, but in our flesh. So, we've got to take people beyond just one thing that God has given us. We've got to see the whole picture, that God is bigger than just the box we have him in, because every time you put him in a box, he'll break out. I just wanted to say that. I couldn't hold my peace when she...
Well, I'm glad you could. But Pastor Young, but think about all this going on, and that woman is depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And also that woman has no faith, is not a believer. What do you say to her?
You pray with her, because when people, the statistic I gave earlier, that 87% of women turn to a person of faith. And even with the suicide, we National Suicide in the Black Church, this year will be our 10th one, and we've been doing this for almost 20 years. We're the founders of the Black Church in Suicide, the National Black Church in Suicide. One of the things that we have found in that the person that most people call 90% is the percentage that we were given. 90% of the people that take their lives, they reach out to a person of faith before they do it, which means that we've got to do a job of equipping those who are behind those sacred desks to believe that they're not the only one. And there may be people that come in that they've reached their extremity. So that's your opportunity to introduce them to God. But you can't just give them God without understanding that they may need some other things to help them along the way. I believe totally and wholly in the power of God, and I never underestimate it. But we have to understand that there are people who will come that have no faith. But you can promote their faith if you deal with them properly. And we need to get some training in our pulpits, in our churches. People of faith need to be trained, and they need to understand that they could be a part of the stigma. So in order for us to remove the stigma, we've got to work together, hand in hand, with the professionals, with the pastors, and then we can really open some doors and get people the help that they need.
I agree. I like that. Dr. Stewart, I see you shaking your head, sister, and I want you to come in because someone said mind, body, and soul. That's the whole healing. Dr. Stewart, what do you say?
Amen, first of all.
Yes.
I get teased by Pastor Young a lot about not staying in my lane. So I'm gonna endeavor right now, Pastor, to stay in my lane. But as I'm sitting here listening, what I am hearing, and I hope this message is also coming across to everybody who's listening. There is no one solution to the issue of why Black women are hurting. If you look at this panel and what each of us respectively brings, We've got the formal structure of healthcare system and how most people think of it, because Dr. Willis is part of a structure and a system where if you have the ability through that, you can get just about anything that you need. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got Pastor Young and the Healing Center and the Emotional Fitness Centers of Tennessee. And if I could just brag for a minute on the Emotional Fitness Centers of Tennessee, it is the only model like it in the nation. They are recruited across the country to come and tell other churches how to do this. We have a national treasure in the Emotional Fitness Centers of Tennessee, and Pastor Young and Bishop William Young. So I just had to sing a little praise there for a minute, Pastor. But it is that extreme to cover the various needs of Black women. In the middle of all of that, we've got programs like mine, where if it's not just you, but your family, especially your children, and they're running amok or out looking out of their minds or whatever, characterization you want to give, you've got programs like mine that are accessible, whether you can afford to pay or not, because a lot of our services are provided through grants and other funding. That means you don't have to pay anything to get the help that we offer. And then you've got you and Dr. Jeffries on the radio broadcasting the message: don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed, learn to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable. As someone put in the chat, it's a sign of strength to say, I am not okay today. The thing we ought to all leave tonight saying is, it's okay if I'm not okay. It doesn't mean I'm less of a person. It doesn't mean I've got character flaws. It doesn't mean that God has abandoned me. All it means is that right now, in this moment, I am not okay, and I'm gonna ask somebody for help. And Dr. Jeffries, I was shaking my head too when you were talking, because there is this notion amongst Black women that we defeat ourselves with this sense that we can't trust each other. And we have got to figure out how to get beyond that. We can be our strongest source of support if we could allow ourselves to say, your experience is a lot like mine. I really need somebody who understands my experience. That could be you. Can we talk? And we need to be able to do that without the fear that what I say to you is going to wind up on Bev Johnson's show. Y'all know Dr. Stewart crazy, right? She talk all of that sensible stuff, but y'all know she really crazy. And I know because she told me, I've got to work myself up to feel like, if I've got to work myself up to feel like I can trust you, that's too much work. And today, between the pandemic of Corona and the pandemic of the social stuff and the racial stuff that's going on, I don't have any energy to use in that way. I find it important to keep a circle around me of family and friends, so I don't have to have those kinds of things. And I'm at that age where I rarely expand my circle anymore, because it's too much work to vet people to let them in. But I understand for some people who don't have that, who don't have the church, who don't have a sister circle, who aren't part of a sorority, who didn't come out in the era of everybody had a social network that they could rely on, that sometimes you got to put a little effort into making yourself available for a friend. And sometimes in the reverse, that friend makes themselves available to you. And I think it is so important during this time of the pandemic that we take time to take care of each other. I've seen self-care and what do you do? I've seen some wonderful examples in the chat box here about what people do. Everybody on this call needs to commit to one thing that they will be consistent with in the area of self-care. We all need something. Whatever it is that makes you smile. For me, I told the group once, if I wake up in the morning, since we've been in this safer at home or sheltered in place thing, whatever we're calling it these days, if I wake up in the morning and don't have a smile on my face, I put on some music that makes me smile. I am demanding of myself that I start in the right frame of mind, because Lord knows there's going to be enough over the course of the day that's going to piss me off, make me mad, and frustrate me beyond belief. So I have to start from a place of positiveness and then remember throughout the course of the day. I was happy when I was listening to Pharrell sing Happy. Let me remind myself what that felt like. Let me get those endorphins going again, because that's what helps us stay on an even keel. That's what allows us to not be so frustrated, to not feel so overwhelmed, and to not be so exhausted at the end of the day that all we can do is fall out. And we don't want to be around nobody. We don't want to talk to nobody. If somebody say hello to us, we chop off their head. You know, for some people, this pandemic has been a wonderful thing. We've been able to meditate and journal and other stuff. But people who got several generations in the house, who have to go out to work, who are worried about the virus and infecting themselves and others, this has been hell. Excuse my language. It's been hell. Because every moment that you are doing this stuff to take care of yourself, you got 17 other things rolling around in your head. Am I going to infect grandmama if I go to the grocery store to get the food that we need? And I don't really trust that pickup service. So I'm gonna have to go in with the cart myself and pick my vegetables because she only wants certain. You know, we have these things that rattle around in our brain that take up all of that time and energy. It's okay, ladies, to say, I'm not okay. It's okay to say that.
I like that. And Dr. Jeffries, you've said that all the time. It's okay to say we're not okay. But one of the things I want to ask you, Dr. Jeffries, and because I know we're going to take some questions from the group, that you always talk about pen to paper and journaling and writing these things down. Should we write these things down if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling sad? Should we do this pen to paper?
I'm a strong believer in the power of journaling. For one thing, it clears your mind. If you don't write it down and process it that way, just getting it out of your head, we carry all of that stuff around in the head. And after a point, it's just too much up there for you to even sort through. So we end up with migraines and feeling stressful and tight muscles and what have you. And the other thing is that the experience of taking and writing into paper a thought, a feeling, analyzing your behavior, asking a question and reflecting on the answer helps you learn how to use the assets that you have. Because the truth be told, there are many, many things that only you have the answer to. But we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our own feelings about things. But when you write it down and you allow yourself to just flow with that, don't judge it, don't critique your writing or whatever, just get it out of you to the point that you can look back at it. That in itself can be extremely healing. And I think it's so necessary. Like I said, I'm biased towards that, but it's so many of us who never pick up a pencil and write about anything. And they miss an opportunity of getting that, oh, this is what this means. Oh, this is why I've been feeling like that. For trauma patients, it's exceptional because you can get out of you the experience, and then you're able to write and reframe it as to how I'm going to manage it. You're not going to erase it, but you're choosing and empowering yourself to come up with a process of how you're going to manage it. And that puts you back in control of that, as opposed to carrying around this luggage of things that have happened to us, you know, unfettered dreams and missed opportunities and so much disappointment and what have you. That's killing us. That's killing us. It's killing our body, our mind, and our heart, and our soul.
Thank you. Representative Camper, I want to come in and talk to you all. And I know that being an elected official and all of, especially Black women who are elected officials, I'm sure you get worn, you get stressed, you're tired, you're about to pull your hair out. What questions would you ask these professionals? to help you and your colleagues?
Well, thank you, Bev, and thank all of our panelists. They've done such a great job. Um, I think the question I would ask would be around, particularly, those elected officials who have several committees they got to go to, their own legislation that they're trying to pass, trying to understand legislation that's come before their committees, the community asking you to come to this event. Everyone wants you to show up for these kinds of things. And how do we, like she said earlier, we can't say no. That's a word that's not in our vocabulary sometimes. How do we better manage our time and our priorities as we're dealing with all of these things that are so pressing on us, and we feel compelled to have to do and perform and always be at the top of our game, because people are always watching what's going to come out of our mouth, what's going to end up in the newspaper. Did I say that right? So it's a lot of pressures from a lot of different angles on us. So how can we help prioritize our time and manage our clock, if you will, on all of these things that are just facing us all the time? Let me also say, while I have the mic, and some of my colleagues, I'm sure that they are thinking of questions as well. Nobel Women has been a leader as it pertains to telehealth and telemedicine. So she mentioned how so many people are using it now. I remember when I was still a young legislator coming in, went to Nobel, my first little meeting, and we were talking about that then in 2009. And in 2012, I know it was a huge panel around at our conference, and a lot of members took that resolution back to their respective states to try to get, this stuff done within our states. And now it's the thing to be doing. So I'm just proud of Nobel for being on the forefront of that. And so I will just yield to that and see if any other members have some questions. But thank everybody for your input so far.
Right. Oh, and we will take questions. And if anyone has a question, feel free, write down to our panelists or our legislators. Anyone have a question or two?
They could raise their hand. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we have any questions? While we waiting for a question, maybe if you put, I can see, but I wanted to ask also, go back to Dr. Stewart, and one of the things that you talked about as we try to, you said it's okay to say that you're not okay, but how do we get that message out to other women? Really, we're doing it now with us and Nobel, but how do we get that question that, especially during this pandemic, a lot of women are not okay, but they are afraid and ashamed to say they're not okay?
And I think we have to practice and learn to do better is to have these conversations. And they don't always have to be this large a group. It could just be you and your best friend or your sister or, your neighbor, that y'all are seeing more of each other because neither one of y'all are going to the office and staying out of the house all day. And we just have to somebody has to risk feeling vulnerable. Somebody has to risk having the courage, and somebody has to risk saying to a good friend that they know is not okay, I know you are not okay. When this pandemic started and people would ask, well, how are you doing? I would say, as well as can be expected. And they would look at me and say, well, what does that mean? I said, well, today, because I'm listening to the news too much, or, I have too many meetings, I'm doing as well as can be expected. My plan for tomorrow is to have maybe one less meeting and look at the TV a lot less, because then I'll feel better. And I realized that I was psyching myself into understanding that I could both admit that this was a challenging day and share the fact that you can plan to have a better one tomorrow. It's small things like that. It's risk taking. It's allowing yourself to feel vulnerable. I have seen, for example, Representative Camper, when she is on and running. I mean, literally running. I wonder why she's not in roller skates the way she's whizzing back and forth through the halls. And, you know, I've been in the hearing room. I've watched her come in, do her thing, go out, do another hearing, come back before the one I was in was over, say something pithy and ask a question that needed to be asked, and then run out and do it again. And I wonder how she does it. You know, and I'm sure there are people, other legislators on this call today who have similar schedules. Well, I'm not the best at giving advice on how not to try to do everything, because most of you who know me know that I try to do it all. But what I am learning, partly because of age and partly because the pandemic has forced me to change my ways, I'm learning to delegate. I'm learning to let other people take the first pass at drafting something instead of me having to do it. I'm learning to let other people make that phone call that I could comfortably make, but I want them to start learning how to be comfortable doing these cold calls and asking for stuff that they think people are going to say no to. I think it's a good way to train the next generation. And what I'm getting from that is, at the end of the day, I'm still tired, but I'm not exhausted.
All right.
I'm strategizing differently. I'm taking advantage of the people who work for me and with me to let them loose, to make mistakes, to learn. If they have learned nothing else from me, write a good letter, make a good phone call, admit when you're wrong, and then if all else fails, bring it to me and I'll fix it. But, you know, I'm learning to make me number 4 instead of number 1 in the line of things to do and people who have to do them.
Okay. Dr. Willis, I have a question for you. Someone wanted to know, how do women look for service providers to help them?
So there are a list on our website, but like I said, if you call in and just ask, we're willing to definitely tell you who's in network, who's near you, different services that are near you. So we're always available to help like that.
What happens if there are people who are not with Blue Cross Blue Shield? Do you all still give out that information or steer them somewhere else?
We will still give them that information. We'll always encourage somebody, if they have coverage, you do want to check with who you have coverage with, but we'll still give them that information. We'll also kind of teach them how to look at the websites themselves and how to check to see if the provider they want to see is in network. And they can always call the provider themselves. I mean, you can really just Google the providers in the area and just ask them, do you accept this coverage? And they're willing to tell you if they do or not.
Okay, okay. Question for Dr. Jeffries. Dr. Jeffries, somebody wanted to know if weeping and crying, is that okay? Should you let it out or should you keep it in?
Oh, definitely you should let it out. And I think that a good cleansing cry, tears can be healing and releasing things. But now if you're doing that all day, every day, or that's your default thing for dealing with your problem and what have you, then that becomes another problem. So I think that people try to keep the stiff upper lip and what have you. And you find people who say, well, I haven't cried in 10 years, what have you. That means nothing has touched your soul in 10 years. A good movie, a sad movie, a happy experience. I mean, a beautiful day, all of those kinds of things. Everything doesn't have to be just raging tears, but allowing yourself to feel true emotions is one sign of good mental health. And practicing that, it helps us stay in tune so that we can identify and acknowledge when things are not quite in alignment, when they don't feel right or when we feel off. You know, because you can stay locked down so long on your emotions until we are out of touch with them. And there are a lot of people, and Black women, some Black women are very good at that. They are the strong, stoic type. They don't do much smiling. They don't laugh a lot. They take no breath, you know, and they scare a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the true thing is that we want to really experience all of our emotions. because they are giving us some type of signal about what's going on with us, within us, and around us.
So you're saying that it is healthy to let those emotions out rather than keep them in, because if you keep them in, will you explode at some time?
I think that it depends on your personality, but I can tell you this, you may not explode, but your body is going to react in some fashion. You're going to develop some types of body pains, you're going to have headaches, you're going to feel stress in key areas, your shoulders, your lower back, you know, you're going to feel lethargic, it may impact your appetite. The mind, the body, and the heart are all connected. And when anything kind of clogs up that funnel that goes through all of that, you will know when something is wrong. And I think that there are very few people who store up emotions who are not aware that of what they're doing. They've decided that they're going to be that sturdy bridge. They're going to be the backbone. They don't want anybody to see them cry or feel overwhelmed or to be upset. Now, they will let loose in anger because that throws people off and it pushes them away. But any other emotion, they play it very close to their chest, because once you see me cry, then you know I'm vulnerable. And then I go back into my paranoid state. Now you know one of my weaknesses, so you're going to use it against me. You know, we write those advanced scripts so we can just go to them and pull them up, whatever's going on.
I know Dr. Stewart had talked about that, you know, having friends and having somebody, and I know we've discussed this a lot, that some women will say, I don't have any friends, I don't have any girlfriends, I don't have anybody, I don't like to be with women. What do you say? Something is going on with that woman.
That usually is a coping mechanism, you know? But one of the things I was thinking about in terms of this panel and an action item, if each one of us found one interesting person that you may casually know or you'd like to know better, and you make a point of connecting or reaching out with that person and just having a conversation and what have you. And now, you know, it's convenience. You can do it on Zoom or you can do it by phone or whatever. And then there's a second person, a young person, or might not necessarily be younger in age, but someone who is in the learning stage. They're developing. And it doesn't have to be with work. It could be a young mother. It could just be a young woman who you can offer some support and guidance to. And you commit to mentor that person and develop that kind of relationship with them. And then the third person, you find you really look at your very best friend, your long-term friend, that person that you have that deep emotional connection with. And you commit to continue to nurture that and to give back some of the love and the care and the concern that you have gotten from that relationship. If you don't have a deep, long-term relationship, find somebody that you would like to begin to build a friendship with. And the thing about this is that these are gifts to yourself. It sounds like you're doing it for other people, but in actuality, you have created a triage support group for yourself, where through your giving, you're actually receiving the type of social interaction, the type of nurturing, the types of connections that we all need, so that, in the words of Pastor Young, you can be emotionally fit, so that the work that you do and that we do and continue to do, we are refueling and rejuvenating and renewing ourselves. That's a part of the self-care that caregivers and care providers often forget. We do so much giving and listening and bearing witness to other people's problems. We forget that we need to get some of that back. So those are three people that I invite you and encourage you to bring into your life and make a commitment to nurturing them. And you can manage it. I know that for some people, who are super, super busy. You can work it in and what have you, but it's for you and your part and the part of your self-care. So I think it's important enough to at least give it a trial basis.
Okay, I have a question and any of the ladies can answer this. The question says, she says, my 22-year-old daughter suffers with borderline personality disorder. It's been really hard to find services that are culturally competent to support her. How do we find good services for young Black women? Who wants to address that? Anyone? Dr. Willis, Dr. Stewart, where could she get some good services?
Well, I'll just contribute a piece. I will say now that telemedicine and telehealth has expanded. If she's connected with a provider already, I would say this opens the door for that provider to connect with specialists, you know, more broadly now. So I would say have that conversation now and see if it has expanded that access for them. So that's just one thing that she could think of now. That really has gone a long way to present options that may not have been there before.
So and what about, Dr. Willis, that finding somebody you're comfortable with? Because a lot of times, you know, you're not comfortable with that provider. Is it okay to change?
Absolutely. We would encourage people to find somebody that they fit with. I mean, we want them to be comfortable so they can let that guard down and have the best interaction possible. The thing is, don't give up. If the first person that you interact with is not the right person, please don't give up. Keep trying.
Okay, good. And I know that sometimes it's hard, and especially for Black women, and you want somebody that looks like you, and oftentimes you don't get that. Do you request it? You would like an African American professional?
Absolutely. I think it's fine to request it and ask who, you know, the providers may know that may fit your needs. But again, I would not, and I know the other ladies here can speak to this better, but don't forsake getting what you can get in the relationship until you find that good fit for you. So again, just don't give up. Keep pursuing the right fit.
Mm-hmm. You agree, Dr. Stewart?
I would, and you know, I'm sure this is not going to come as a surprise to anyone, but there simply are not enough Black therapists of any discipline, psychiatry, psychology, social work, to satisfy the real need in the Black community if everybody wants a Black therapist. I think for psychiatry, we're about 4% of the total number of practicing psychiatrists in the country. 4% of, and there are like 40,000 members in my organization, and not everybody who's a psychiatrist is a member, but if you think about it, 4% of 40,000, that's not a whole lot of people. And I think Dr. Willis makes a good point. Don't give up on getting help because you can't find a Black person to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this, the most important thing is starting the help. And there are other ways to fill in the cultural issue. If it really becomes problematic, there are opportunities like Pastor Young described at the Healing Center, where most of the counseling staff is Black. If your need is such that that level of counseling will address your problem, then go there. We have people who are in some of the clinics who happen to be Black. A lot of people have bias against going to what they consider a clinic because that's not for them. But some of the best therapists I know work in clinic settings, and they are happy to see patients who want to be helped and who have the ability to work with them to provide that help. So just, you know, Dr. Willis said it best, just don't give up.
Okay. I know, Dr. Jeffries, in the past that we have always worked in groups. Would you suggest if women could find a support group to work with them? Because I know that has been helpful in the past, that in the groups that I've worked with.
Oh, absolutely. I think, again, therapeutic groups offer clients the same type of socialization and connecting with other people that would be greatly beneficial. One of the things that I'm really proud of that we did, Bev, is that I guess it's been like 25 years ago now, but we started a citywide all Black women's support group. And we offered it on every Wednesday night, none fail. We had a licensed professional there who would meet, and we set up the criteria was no judgment. You come in, you did not have to talk unless you wanted to. The key is that you would be respectful and validating to the other women in the group. But whatever it is that you said, that no one would be allowed to judge you on it. And there were people who told us we were wasting our time with that you would not get Black women to come to a public place and meet, and that they would maintain the confidentiality of the group. And we did that, what, like 5 or 6 years. Not one time did I ever hear that anybody violated the confidentiality of the group. Even if I missed, you weren't here, we can't tell you, you know, kind of thing. So I think that there's a hunger that's been there, and creating a safe space is important. Like what Pastor Young is doing at the Healing Center, they've been doing fantastic work for years. And especially if people are depressed and dealing with grief and bereavement, I know Pastor Young, William Young, helped me tremendously when my brother was killed and when my father died. So I know the quality of their work, so I would not hesitate to recommend them. The key for clients is they think that if they ask for a person of color or another Black woman, and that may be the very person that you don't have a fit with. The key is really explaining to them is that what you're going in to do, as Dr. Willis was saying, you're going in to create a relationship so that you can get some support and guidance and facilitation on working through your issues. And you're just as obligated as that therapist is to try to make this work. Now, you may do trial and error, but don't just go in and because the person doesn't look like you, just cast them aside. Now, you may have a preference for gender, but what I'm saying is allow yourself the opportunity to screen and find and give yourself a chance. If they're competent, see if you can work with them, because finding available, competent, caring therapists, mental health specialists, any of those people, they're premium now. And with telehealth, it's even harder to get an appointment. So, you know, shop around, but you do diligence on that as well.
Okay. Pastor Young, and I want to ask you this, that during this time of pandemic, Pastor Young, a lot of people are losing their loved ones. And as Dr. Jeffries mentioned about grieving and bereavement, how can you help them? Because it seems like every day, Pastor Young, I'm hearing about somebody's loved one who's died, or, you know, we're having these killings or crimes. How do you deal with that, Pastor Young, with the grieving and people who are in bereavement at this time?
It has been very difficult because when people are grieving, we touch them, we hold them, we comfort them, we pack the church. Now you can't pack the church. In some cases, you can't even go to the church. We're doing graveside services for those who who we think really deserved it. And it has been what my husband and I, a matter of fact, before I came on here, we went on Facebook Live and we did a grief session. So we have a group of mothers that continue to meet, mothers who've lost children. They continue to meet. They do it virtually. Grief has become something that we kind of major in because so many people are hurting. I think it's important that we find these virtual groups now And so we can make that connection. And, you know, we can't touch each other physically, not in many cases, but our words touch. And so we've got to utilize our words as a source of comfort during these times. You know, when we talk about The Blessing, which is a book that we've read, you know what I'm talking about. Really, only one thing is touch, and that's the first element of the blessing. The other four have to do with what we say. So we have to begin to comfort one another with these words, as Paul wrote to the church at Thessalonica. We've got to begin to comfort each other with our words, and until we get to a place where we can touch again. But we're gonna have to use what we've got until we get there.
One of the things that I know that may be depressing us as well, and anyone can jump in with this, answer this question, is, you know, when I watch the news, and I'm a news person, I get depressed, and it's like, I don't want to hear this anymore. What do we do? What'd you say? Pastor Young, turn it off?
Turn it off. Turn it off. Don't let it get in your spirit, and don't let it consume you. Many people are depressed that call us. We've had more suicide because we do suicide in the Black church. We've actually had more suicide calls during this pandemic than we've had in the last 4 years, and I am not exaggerating. Matter of fact, that's what my husband was doing just a few minutes ago when I was coming in here. These calls are coming, and they have to do with what's going in. We got to stop letting all this stuff go in us. Turn it off to everybody.
Amen.
I don't care if you're in the business. Turn it off.
Amen.
You said, Dr. Stewart, amen?
Amen. Amen. That breaking news story now is going to be the same breaking news an hour from now and tomorrow morning. It ain't going to change. It's still going to be the breaking news. And the flurry of news and this 24-hour news cycle, and everybody wants to hear the latest thing from the CDC and how many people died. Pastor is absolutely right. All of that stuff going in does nothing but sink into your soul and create a negative environment where depression thrives.
Absolutely. And I think we have to turn off some social media as well.
Yeah.
That's another place that can just really get into your thoughts, and you can't feed into that. So it's either something that gets into your thoughts, or you're looking at people that are living perfect lives even during this time. And then you get depressed, wondering how they're living a perfect life when you're over here struggling, and all they're giving you is this facade that's not real.
Dr. Jeffries, I see you shaking your head. You want to say something? So you agree? You're muted. Yeah. So I'll mute you so I can hear what you're saying. So
no, I was agreeing with all
Okay.
that has been said by all three. It is absolutely phenomenal how we are just geared to and glued to all of this social media until it's taken on a life of its own. You know, some people wake up to Facebook, and other people say good night to my Facebook family and stuff. And then with the news staying on all day long and in the background and everybody repeating the same thing, it just gets on you and it weighs on you. And you know, in the beginning, everybody was in a panic about it, but it didn't shape behavior really enough for us to take what we were hearing on that as information and move forward and make changes. Now we're just listening to it, and it's just keeping us on in a hyper agitated state. So I agree. You'll hear the sirens and stuff if things really get bad. So, you know, I agree, turn it off.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to ask the question. But what really bothers me is when I turn on the news, the local news, what really affects me emotionally is that I always see people that look like me, like our children, our grandchildren, and it's on every station, 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And it's like all the news basically starts with coverage of crime and the kids always look like our kids. That creates a lot of anxiety for us as mothers and grandmothers. And when we see that time and time and time again, day in, day out, year after year, that has an impact on us. And even though we are going through our daily lives, you know, trying to take care of our families and be good servants and take care of our children, that directly impacts us. Why is it that the media, the news media, feels that it's so important to continually air, you know, Black children and Black people in a not positive way? Because our children and grandchildren do as many positive things in the community as the crime that you see on TV. And I just don't really understand it. I mean, certain crime, yes, we want to know about, you know, serial murderers or rapists or things that are really going to impact the community. But a lot of the petty crime that we see time and time and time again, and our children's and grandchildren's mugshots on the news, I mean, that sends a very poor message throughout the community. And I think that there's got to be some effort to address that, because it paints Memphis in a very bad light, and it makes it appear that, you know, Memphis is just not a place where you want to live, and that it's full of crime. And that, I mean, there's a lot of good things that go on here. So what can we do to encourage the media or the people who head up the media to reduce, you know, to not portray our kids and our husbands and our fathers and our daughters and grandchildren in such a negative light?
I think that it's a part of all the psychological profiling that all of the media stations do. And it's not just here, it's just everywhere. That when you sensationalize about something that a young child has done, or there was a violent crime that was committed by somebody who's Black and what have you, it validates and affirms all of the prejudicial biases and stereotypes that has been put out there forever about who we are, what our children are about, and what our lives are about. And through that sensationalism, you're going to get people who watch it, because then they feed on that negativity and it affirms then their beliefs about it. So it's a form, in my opinion, of institutional racism, and the medium that is used out there to make sure that it's current, that it's alive, and that it's vibrant. We have a political system now where there are no holds barred. You say what you think and feel, no matter whether it's true or not, and make declarative statements about people. Most of them are just basic lies, but it's out there and it's repeated, and then they play it over, and then they discuss it, and then the next people discuss it, and what have you. And when they know it's a lie, but it keeps us out there, and it keeps the negativity growing. And I think that unless we can form a campaign to write station managers that we're not going to view their programming unless they have a more equitable presentation of everybody in the community, not just imbalance. Because the same thing happens here in Jackson. You know, we get the kids that, and the worst possible pictures of them, you know, the baggy pants, the handcuffs on them. Every one of them looks like they just ran away from an asylum or something, or they just out there and with this wild look in it, and that scares people, Black and white. So it serves a purpose. It's not just innocent.
And Bev, if I could just jump in for a second. The people here in Memphis who ever heard me get interviewed know that I have a campaign underway to stop using the word juvenile when we're talking about children, because words matter. And while the campaign to the news station managers will have a major impact, there are small things we can do as a community, particularly as women, because this hits right, as you said, to the heart of, that could be my son or my brother or my father or my husband or something, that if we start with the fact that people need to understand that words matter, every every time I hear the word juvenile to refer to a child. Now, you have to say juvenile justice system or juvenile reform and some of those other things. But if we're talking about a human being, I tell an audience, unless you got up this morning and called your child juvenile, then don't call nobody else's child juvenile. That's something we can do without any letter writing or anything. We just have to make it clear that we will not accept it. We will not accept it, and step to people who do it and say no. You know, that's my campaign for the last couple of years. Pastor, no, I'll say it to anybody. I've said it in front of mayors. I've said it at governor's meeting. I'll do it anywhere because the children rely on us to stop this war on them. And if we let it happen to kids, they grow into adults who assume it's okay, and people say things about them and they internalize that stuff. And that's how we get people who don't care about themselves. They don't care about others. They commit these heinous crimes, and they're our children, and we say we love them. How could they do it? That's not my child. That's not how they were raised. Well, they were raised to hear things said about them that they shouldn't have had to live with, and we have the power to stop that. I'm sorry, Bev. I get on my soapbox.
No, good. And I'm glad. Thank you, Judge Felicia. But other questions? Come on, you all chime in. You have questions for them. I love that.
Senator Ackberry has a question.
Hey, Senator Ackberry. Come on in, Senator.
Hey, Bev, how you doing? Can y'all hear me okay?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm making it.
All right.
Listen, first of all, you guys have been dynamic. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for everything you've done on this call and you continue to do in our community. I think somebody kind of alluded to it a little bit, but it's I'd like you guys to give us some tips a little bit on how to balance things when you do always have to be on. And I think especially as elected women, sometimes people, they don't realize the level of commitment and engagement that is required. And so people are very, very critical if you say no. You only come around election time. You are often trying to balance working, family, serving in the legislature, trying to do a good job at that. Can you give us some tips on balancing that and kind of what that can look like for elected women?
Ladies, who wants to start? Dr. Jeffries, can you help out? Okay, Senator Ackberry out.
Okay, I think that first of all, recognizing all of the tasks and the level of activity that you're engaged in, and you have to decide what's priority, because everything is not got to do it at the top of the list. And that is the hardest thing in the world for us who think and we really believe we can do it all. And so what we have to do is then begin to prioritize what it is that we can manage and what has to maybe go to a lower level, what we can delegate, as Dr. Stewart was saying, and what may just have to be a no this time. The thing about it is that particularly when we're in service, it really bothers us when we say, I don't think I can do this, or this is not a good time with us, because we know how people may perceive that we're blowing them off or you just didn't want to do it and what have you. But if you've already began to kind of manage your life, I invite women especially to create the pie where you allocate percentages of exactly what it is that you do. And you kind of first start off during the day where you note everything that you're doing and approximately how much time that you spend, because it's just like calories. We waste so much time, or we spend too much time on one thing and not enough time on the other, that we end up running and trying to crash it all in until the end of the day. But really pay attention to how you use your pie during the day. And once you do that for 2 or 3 days, you should have a feel for what's eating up most of your time? Is it by choice or force or neglect that particular thing is eating up all your time? And what is it that you need in your life? Is that on the pie? Usually not, or not so much. So you have to work out trade-offs to make sure that that's in place. Only you can do this because you have to make the judgment call. And one of the tips for choosing what has to go lower on the priority list, what if you can't do it tomorrow? What if you totally incapacitated, you can't do it, somebody else has to pick up the ball, and that is life. You know, if we stop, fall short, get sick or whatever, somebody else has to do it or won't get done. So you put the things on there, what would happen if I don't do this? Or who could do it if I could do? And you begin to negotiate on your own behalf so that your pie then begins to look in percentages more to what's healthy and revitalizing to you. And keep in mind, it's not just getting through the day. You want to put into practice what's going to get you through the journey. So you got to put those things in place that keep you balanced, that nurture you, that take care of you, and that you don't have to do everything. You do not have to be the backbone to everything.
Can I kind of piggyback on what Dr. Jeffrey said?
Sure.
Ramesh, I think what has helped me, and I just turned 60 on my birthday in April, but you know, I always felt that I needed to be perfect. You know, you have to be the perfect spouse, you have to be the perfect mother, the perfect professional, the perfect Christian, you know, the perfect daughter, the perfect grandma. So we have to, you know, we as Black women feel that we have to be perfect. And a lot of times that we have to work 300% harder to get where we need to be and to stay where we want to be. But I think if we can give ourselves permission to say, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be everything for everyone. And what we said earlier about it's okay to say, I don't feel good today, because I didn't give myself permission until I was 59 years old. And I can look back now and see that, because I was so busy trying to do everything and be everywhere and afraid to say no. What are they going to think about me? But, you know, the thing about it is that I realized, you know, when I turned 60, that people know who I am. They know what my passions are. And I don't have to continuously every single day of my life, and I see Dr. Stewart shaking her head, to try to prove over and over and over and over again who I am. So, you know, we're all on a path, whether we're in elected officials or professionals or homemakers, you know, we all have a very difficult job. And just the last year, I've started to give myself permission to say, I don't feel so good today. You know, why don't you feel so good? I don't know. I just don't feel good. Or I don't want to go to that. You know, I really just want to stay home and lay down, or I want to eat something. You know, I just want to spend time by myself. And after I've done that a few times, you'd be surprised how comfortable you get with that, because it makes you feel so good, as opposed to going to an event that you really don't want to go to, or doing something that you really don't want to do. So I guess my suggestion would be just to think about what's important to you, and to just remember that we don't have to be perfect. You know, we are all exceptional. Every single person on this on this program tonight is exceptional in our own right. And we don't have to continue all of our lives to try to prove that. So I wish that I had learned that 20 years ago when I was in my 40s, as opposed to coming to that realization at 59 and 60. But I think as you get older, you tend to get a little bit more comfortable, because I remember when I was out 45, 50, 60, I mean, I was out there like, you know, I didn't even have time to say to myself, I don't feel good. I'm not having a good day. I don't ever remember saying that, unless of course I had the flu. But, you know, in terms of mental health or just emotional. No, you don't have time to even think about that. So it's important that we, as the other panelists have said, to be okay with embracing not having a good day and not really take it too hard, because we're always going to have good days. We're going to have not so good days, but overall, we're just thankful that we can all be here and serve our community and be supportive of each other and do the jobs and fulfill the goals that God has for our lives. So that's what's helped me. And I wanted to share that because it's been, ever since I turned 60, it's just like the light bulb just came off. So I'm looking forward to what's happening between 60 and 70. I really
I for the diehard super women out there, and I know many elected officials and appointed folks are diehard super women, and everything that we're saying is going in one ear and circulating around that mind, and some of it's going out the other ear, and that's okay, because these are challenging behaviors to change. Let me just put this out there though. If you are in a position where there are seasons, and Pastor, I promise you, I am not getting in your lane, but if you're in a position where there are seasons to what you do, you're in session X number of months, then for that period of time, if you have to be on your superwoman track, then invest in having people around you who understand that, pick up your slack, who help you say no or cover for you or something. Cultivate that circle of support so that you don't wind up feeling guilty every time you have to say no, because people gonna feel some kind of way. And then in the times when that is not the season that you're in, relish in the fact that saying, as the judge said, it's okay that I don't feel like that today. I don't want to go there today. Today I want to sit home and eat ice cream, and I'm okay with that. So you really are the diehard superwoman that I know some of you are, Senator. Ladies. I had to do that, right?
I see you.
But if you have to do that, then think of it and prioritize according to season. In that high season, when you got to be on, when you making the deals, negotiating the new laws, changing language, putting out the fires and creating, the new place for everybody. Okay, fine, but surround yourself with people to help you through that season. Don't do that work alone.
All right, any other questions, concerns? I like that. Representative Camper, I'm going to, that each of the ladies kind of, I don't know if we're wrapping up or
We are wrapping up.
Okay, I'm going to give each of our
remarks. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give each one of our panelists last words, ladies, that you would like to leave us with. And I'll start again with Pastor Young. Pastor Young?
I'm going to do a 1-minute sermon, a half-a-minute sermon, and I'm going to tell everybody to remember how Jesus delayed his coming. He took a few more days, and in other words, he said no to people that he loved. So I'm going to encourage you to learn to say no, and then I'm going to encourage you to read Philippians 4:8. Think on these things and ride with it. Get a prayer partner. That's all I have.
All right, Dr. Willis.
I would just say prioritize yourself, take time for yourself. I do want them to say great things about the work that I've done. I want the work that I've done to speak to me and speak for me. So I want them to put that on my obituary, but I'm trying for that obituary not to be tomorrow. So I've got to learn to prioritize myself.
Dr. Stewart.
Well, I feel like I have exhausted my words, but because I always have a couple left, take a moment, ladies, and remember to find some joy in the worst possible situation. When things look their bleakest, find some joy. You'd be amazed at how that chemical interaction in your body can boost your spirits, even if it's just for a short period of time. Find some joy.
And Dr. Jeffries?
I just love it all, and this has just been so wonderful for me. But if I think of what I would most want to leave people with. If we learn to just give ourselves a piece of the love that we offer to work and life and everything else, I think we will all be better for it. And to the judge, it gets better after 60. So you need to just stay on this path and look forward to it. And I think that it is important to do something loving and caring for yourself every day. And you will be amazed at how you respond to that, how you can see a visible difference in it. And we're all deserving.
State Representative Karen Camper, you have those last words.
Thank you. And thank you, Bev. Thank you to all of our panelists, the board of directors, and all the members of Nobel. Really thank you all for this session. It's been wonderful. I can see some of the comments in the chat room. I'm sure everybody has benefited from what we've learned here tonight. And thank you all so much for the tips that you've given us, some of the action items you've given us, and some things that we can actually take and put into our daily life. I love that pie chart. I'm working on that tomorrow. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I also would like to just say thank you to our sponsor. I want to give a special thanks to Blue Cross Blue Shield, because when I thought about this, actually it came from one of our members when I did the letter about We Are Hurting, that we should do something around this. And when we did, Blue Cross Blue Shield said we would love to sponsor this. So I really want to thank you so much, Blue Cross, for doing that for us. And lastly, let me just thank Bev Johnson. Bev have done an awesome job moderating our panel. We really appreciate the thought-provoking questions you put to us. And you know how to move a conversation, lady. And so we really, really appreciate you. So I'm going to leave it at that. This had been recorded, so we'll be able to send this link to others who didn't get to participate. And even if we need to look back at it ourselves, it was just so much great information I was copiously writing down. But we can send that link out, and members can go back and look and get re-energized on some of the tasks that you all have given us. So thank you again, and everyone, please enjoy your night. Enjoy the rest of your week, and take care of yourself, and make sure that you start to do some of the things that they've encouraged us to do. And let me thank our staff, Crystal behind the scenes is running everything. Hey, Crystal. She's behind the scenes making sure that everybody is getting in and getting on Facebook Live and some of the other mediums that we have. So thank you, Crystal, and thank everyone for participating in this panel tonight.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night.
Thank you.
Night.
Night.